Okie doke. So I've just picked this around and I don't remember what's in the exams. So let's just have a look at this and see what comes up. So I guess, yeah, in general, like, so how long have you got till the exam? It's 2 weeks still, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's still plenty of, no need to panic yet. There's plenty of time. So yeah, like practice the questions. Yeah. Do the exercises. Do these questions. And obviously, you know, I'm trying to design things like there's this sort of shame about focusing on the exam, kind of. Oh, you know, I want to learn. I don't want to just focus on the exam. But I'm trying to design the course and the exam so that even if you focus on the exam, you'll actually learn the stuff that I want you to learn. But of course, there's focusing and focusing. You can like, okay, I reckon this question's going to come up and I'm just going to learn it. And that is obviously, I don't want that. But there's more, okay, I need to be able to solve this kind of problem. And the best way to learn is to practice. And then hopefully, if you can sort of nail the math, and then you can also step back and get a better grip on the big picture than you had before you could nail the math. And what, you know, what's actually going on, and whether you really think the model makes sense or not. Or what we can learn from it, what we can't learn from it. Hopefully through learning the math you can actually that'll help you on that front as well. That's the idea. But let's have a look at this first one. Maybe I need to go out this. Oh no.
Oh, yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Well, that's worse.
So this is a typical one, like generally in the exam, if you look at them, there's going to be like, of the 4 questions, there's going to be some kind of essay. There's going to be some kind of fairly straightforward question, but with some relatively tricky math. And there's going to be probably 1 or 2 questions with more of a combination way, like, okay, here's 2 ways of looking at this problem, you know, what's the best, and then you need to do a bit of math, but you also need to be able to discuss what's going on. And so then clearly this is one of these mixed questions, right? So typically in these, the math is like super straightforward. There's not really much math to do if you know what's going on. Like if you've got the big picture. But I might, because I'm not saying do this, do that. You know, if you haven't got the big picture, you might be like, well, just don't know what to do here at all. Okay. So, what have we got? Assume an economy described by the following equations. So the first one, what's that? What's that? Give me some keywords. So, like what sort of thing is it? Leontief, yeah. So mathematically, it's a Leontief function, but what sort of thing is the equation, kind of? But that's absolutely, like, is it a utility function or what?
That's
Right. So it's a Leontief production function. So this is, so generally why So if this was like a paper or something, you would carefully say, well, y is this, a is that, al is that, and so on. But part of the task here is to work that out, okay? Because you need to be confident in, okay, what's going on in these kinds of equations. So the first thing you need to do, because I'm not telling you in the question, is to, okay, what are these equations? What are the variables? So y is going to be the final good, isn't it? Production. And it's a function of what? It's a Leontief function, so it's equal to the least of the two inputs. It's like how many pairs of shoes have you got? You know, it depends on the least of the numbers of the right and left shoes. And what are the two inputs?
Labor and resource.
Right. So L and R would be the sort of physical quantities, wouldn't they? And then what's AL times L? Can you say that in like 2 or 3 words?
Would it be like effective labor?
Right, that's what we generally say. It's the effective labor. The productivity of labor times the amount is the sort of effective labor input. If you want to put it into just a couple of words. So we've got the effective labor inputs and the effective resource inputs. So if we're going to draw a picture, so typically our pictures are going to have these elements, aren't they? This is some kind of resource sector. So we've got labor coming in here, and the resource here. And then okay. So what's the second equation? So that's super straightforward, isn't it? So what's it telling us?
It's telling us how labor productivity is growing.
Right, and how is it growing? But that's good.
Yeah, so it's the labor productivity from previous period plus productivity from previous period times
Theta.
theta. So we just put factor percentage.
Theta. Okay, but then turning that into economic, there's 2 real economic sort of keywords to describe that. Both begin with E. Or both begin with EX actually. Have a chat. Like if we were going to graph the growth rate. So if this is AL, yeah, if we're going to graph AL and this is time, period, 1, 2, 3, what's it going to look like?
Exponential.
Right, it's going to look like this, isn't it? If we join the dots with a or we could join them with straight lines if you like. Yeah? So it's exponential growth. But what else can we say about the growth rate? Are we modeling the causes of the growth?
It's exogenous.
It's exogenous, isn't it? Yeah?
Yep.
Because this theta is just, it's not, there's no equation saying where theta comes from. It's just, and there's no theta t either. So it's just this exogenous constant growth rate. Okie doke. And then what's the third equation?
It shows that we have a fixed stock, and how much resource we're going to be able to extract is going to depend. It's going to have to be less or equal to that stock.
Right. I was almost tempted to you want to come and draw it. But how could I label this? How could I show that on this?
A variable.
Yeah, you want to show that it's a finite resource.
I could basically say, look, imagine this is stock, yeah, and that for each time, if we take a chunk out of it, it's gone, kind of. Yeah? I mean, you get the idea.
Yep.
I'm not saying that you should illustrate it in any particular way, but yeah, we've got this fixed stock, and if each time we take some of it away, it's gone. And then once it's all used up, that's it. So what's going to happen to production? If we totally use up the stock, what's going to happen to Y?
It's gonna end.
There is.
Right, we've got the 0 here. So labour's fixed and it's hired on perfect markets. The resource R is free to extract and open access. Okay. So it's a free-for-all to come and grab the resource. Okie doke. Yeah, fire away.
Or what is the double arrows mean on the LL?
Ah, yeah. So that means it's somewhat vague terminology actually, but it means a lot greater than,
Okay.
as opposed to just greater than, or a lot less than, depending on which direction you read it. Yeah, a lot less than if you read it from left to right. I was reading it from right to left. So basically, what does that mean about the first period? If we're starting in period naught, how much is going to be used? R naught. How much of this whole stock is going to be used in period naught?
Probably not that much.
Not that much.
The production is limited by the labor supply.
Yeah. So even though it's a free-for-all to get the resource, because it's Leontief, you're only ever going to take AL naught, L naught, aren't you? There's no reason to take more. So you're going to have AR naught, R naught will be equal to AL naught, L naught, because this is given, isn't it? You've got the amount of labour, you've got the fixed given labour productivity, this is also given, so then and since AR naught S is much bigger than this, then AR naught R naught must also be much bigger than AR naught S. In other words, or maybe the other way around, smaller. Yeah, smaller. So R naught will be a lot smaller than S. Okay, so I guess because we never went through this, right? And probably it could well be that this question, like now you've seen this, but it could be that when they had got this question, they hadn't even seen this. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind. When it's like us saying about practicing, it's like super important to practice, but don't just think, okay, just because I can do the specific ones, I'm sorted. You need to have the understanding. Okay. But I would claim if you've got this basic understanding, it's super straightforward. I think what I want you to do, I'm going to go and refill here, and I just want you to have a think about this, and have a chat about, so we basically interpreted A, right? We've done A. Is this diagram doing the job? I think it is, isn't it? Because there's no labour going here. So actually, I don't know if anyone did this, but I mean, this would be a nice way to answer the question, to have a diagram and then say, oh, you know, to then write and refer to the diagram.
Like in the A bar, or like
For A, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so have a look at B for about 5 minutes. I think you should be able to get your heads around it in about 5 minutes. I'll go and get myself some more tea and a muffin, actually. Yeah, well, obviously, yeah, do chat about it, you know, if you want to. You can pause the video. Or maybe I should train the camera on you guys. What have you come up with? So what, like we could put numbers on it, which is what you're supposed to do, but what's the big picture? What's gonna happen, kind of?
In the first scenario, like when AR is constant, I think that R is going to track the development of AL, so it's always going to be equal to AL, because AR is always going to be 1 and L is always going to be 1.
Yeah.
So it's going to, like, R is going to take off and it's going to get very, very big very quickly.
So we're not told anything about L, right? So what should we assume about L?
I assumed L is constant.
Right.
It's fixed. It says labor L is fixed.
In fact, here we are in
L
the
is
top
fine.
that, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're not told it up here, but
Fixed.
so L is fixed. We've got 10 units here. AR is constant. L is fixed. AL is going up exponentially. AR is constant. So what's going to happen to R? It's going to go up exponentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in the first period, what was R?
One.
Did you get it to 1? Yeah, so then it's going to be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32.
Yeah.
But already,
Yeah, it's going to be ending. And
so it'll be
in
1,
third period.
2, 4, 2, nothing. And so GDP. Oh, I lost my pen. So GDP. Oh. Did anyone see where I put the pen?
Behind
Is
her,
it there?
probably.
Great.
And that's
Yeah, there it is. Thanks. So GDP is gonna, well, it's like 1, 2, 4, and then back to 2, isn't it? And then to nothing. And this is basically what this limits to growth report predicted. And there are lots of different scenarios. You know, if this, if that, but every time you just fell off a cliff at some point, and in this, you know, it might be a bit earlier or a bit later. So what about the second one? If AR increases by 1. So AR is 1 in the first period, so we have R is going to be 1, isn't it, in the first period. But then in the second period, what's R going to be? If AR is 2 and AL is 2.
Still gonna be 1.
Right, because AL, it is doubling.
Yeah.
Why does it say that?
You can calculate it with
How do we work out what's happening to AL?
I use
Oh,
plug in
theta is 1.
values.
Yeah. Theta's 1.
Yeah.
There it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's crucial, isn't it? So AL t plus 1 is 2, ALT is doubling. So when AL is doubling and AR is increasing by 1, R in the first period will still be 1. In the second period we've got 2 and 2, haven't we? So R will be 1 again. In the third period we've got 4 and 3. So R will be like 1 1/3 or something, I guess.
Yeah.
Because AL is, are you with me?
I think so.
AL is growing faster now, isn't it? Because AL is doing this and AR is doing this. Yeah. So as this gap grows, the demand for the physical quantity of R, the gap between the productivities AL and AR grows, then the physical quantity of R you need is going to grow. Here they were equal. So then, and of course this gap, first it doesn't grow at all, then it grows a bit, then it's going to explode, isn't it? Because here we had AR was like 1, 2, 4, 8, AL, sorry, AL is that, AR is 1, 2, 3, 4, so here it's 2, 16, 5, that's 3 and a bit, isn't it? We're going to need, if you can do the math of course, but it's going to turn out this way. So then we have 2, 3, 5, 8, oops, what's going to happen in the next period?
It's gonna run out.
We're going off the cliff, aren't we? What would happen, so in this case, we get the same path, but then after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 periods, we go off the cliff. What if AR grew exponentially at the same rate as AL? What would R be then?
It'd keep on being 1.
Right. Be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, wouldn't it? Would everything be fine then?
No, after 10 periods.
We're still going to go off the cliff, aren't we? So what's the real problem here?
Then we have a limited resource and no alternative.
That's one of the problems. But even if that was the case, given these exponential growth in the efficiency with which we can use the resource, shouldn't we be able to organize things so that it was okay? We should.
Yeah.
So what's the problem, Alexander?
Well, I don't know, but I've only done like half of the exercises, but if you compare it to like the Malthusian one, where you're like dependent on one resource, you shouldn't you should try to adjust to like make it last longer, right?
Right. Good. And why aren't we adjusting?
It's the part of the production function that we just keep on producing maximum based on AL and AR. So we just like the Y is gonna grow super fast as well.
You're right. Except the first thing you said.
Oh.
It's not to do with the production function. What's the problem?
Is the resource extraction function should be put like the exponential and the well, what's it called? The E1 and oh, maybe I'm far out.
The what? The E?
Yeah. I don't know.
So we've got these three equations, and I'm saying, given those three equations, you should be able to manage the economy in such a way as to have like sustainable production, blah blah blah, if you have exponential growth in both AL and AR. But something about what it says under those equations makes it impossible, as long as that is still true.
If we did labor fixed.
No. It's the property rights, okay? It's the open access resource. Because then there's no price on them, as long as that's the case. And you kind of, well, you assume then, given the way that's written, you assume that the people don't coordinate and manage the resource. Because then immediately then it's not open access anymore. If they're coordinating and saying, nah, we need to manage this carefully and so on. That's not what we mean by open access, kind of. Because then the community is restricting access, kind of. So this is a total free-for-all. Then this is what happens. Okay, so we're assuming in using those words, we're saying that this is a free-for-all. People are not coordinating to manage the use of those resources. That's the problem. So what would happen? Have a think about this. What would happen if instead you had a lot of small resource owners? So there's 1 million people in the economy, and you could even imagine there's 1 million or thousands of them own, or hundreds at least, own little bits of this resource. It's still free to extract. There's no cost. So it's like a cake. You talk about a cake eating problem. You just come and get it whenever you want it. But now you have property rights over it. Have a think about that. This is super, super important. Just think about that, chat, or whatever, if you like, for a couple of minutes.
Well, isn't this the case where we have like scarcity? I mean, if someone has copyright for it, they would love to sell it. I mean, it would be a greater and greater price
Yeah, the
when
price,
the resources running out.
the price should follow the interest rate, where they're gonna sell when the price is equal to
Oh, yeah.
the research rent.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be more and more expensive to produce, I guess. I think. It's what we said in first.
So what
They're
is that?
only gonna
I guess
sell
it was-
like when they're in there.
Does that make sense?
Not indifferent between selling and not selling. It's like the only price that's gonna be able to hold. Because otherwise it's gonna flood the market and it's gonna be a problem, or otherwise no one's gonna sell.
Right.
There's going to be a market for this resource, and each person is going to be thinking, okay, shall I put it on the market now or not? Exactly. Yeah, so you got it. There's going to be a market for the resource. So each individual resource holder or owner is going to think, okay, shall I sell it this period or later? And that decision will depend on what they expect about the price of the resource over time. And basically we can show that the only equilibrium that makes sense is that the price rises at the interest rate. And of course, because there's no dynamic problem in this model, because of this free-for-all, we're not told anything about the interest rate. We need a utility function to know what the interest rate is going to be. If we had a super, super straightforward interest rate utility function with exponential pure rate of time preference, or a fixed pure rate of time preference, then you would have a fixed interest rate, and the resource the interest rate was bigger than the growth rate, which is what we typically assume because otherwise the models don't really work, then that would lead to an exponential decline in the rate of resource use. Which would lead to sustainability. You know the paradox of the I can't remember what it's called, but it's a Greek paradox. You're trying to sort of cross some pond or something, and you jump, or I don't know what the original paradox is, but you jump halfway across, and then half of what's left, and half of what's left, and half of what's left, and you never get there to the other side. So that's basically what's happening when you have an exponential decline in the rate of resource use. You never actually use up the whole stock, or it's not guaranteed. Just because you have an exponential decline isn't enough, of course. But an exponential decline, if you start at the right quantity of resource use, you will end up never using up everything. You can exponentially use up the resource. And as long as you're not too greedy at the start, you could easily have a case where this rate of decline was small enough that you could actually have Y growing over time with the rate of resource use going down, but AR and AL growing. That wouldn't be possible in either of these cases. So there's multiple problems, if you like. In these cases, a little 1 and 2 here. So there's the property rights is a huge problem. But given this setup, you've also got a problem if you have these. I don't think, well, it could be. No, I'd actually have to think about that. I'm not totally sure. You might be able to maintain stable production just from AL growing. No, of course you can't, no. Because if AR is effectively constant, and in the long run, this is almost the same as it being constant, because the growth rate approaches 0, then Y is limited, Y is effectively equal to a constant times R. But so to hold Y constant, you need to hold R constant. But if you hold R constant, you're going to run out, aren't you? So you're always going to fall off the cliff here, even if you have property rights. Okay. So then, property rights is a huge issue here. And of course we know that for these crucial resource stocks there are property rights. It's not just a free-for-all. Like for fish, it's pretty much a free-for-all. But we're not all going to die if the fish run out. I mean, it's a pretty horrible thing to happen and incredibly unnecessary, etc. But it's not like, okay, we're done for. So property rights is a big problem here because it's not realistic. But even if we change the property rights, it wouldn't be quite this drastic, but we'd still end up falling off the cliff at some point, or we couldn't maintain steady consumption. The future people would be having less and less consumption, which seems like a pretty bad way of running the economy. But is that realistic? If we try to think about the real world now, and so I've criticized the property rights thing, what else could we criticize about the model? So think about this. Like I talked about the fish, and I said, look, okay, if we wipe out all the fish, it's not going to be the total wipeout. But are there resources other than fish where we can use them all up and then we're kind of wiped out?
Not really.
Like, what about fossil fuels? Why not?
Because there's alternative energy sources.
We can use renewables and so on, can't we? What about sort of materials, metals and so on?
We can substitute for other metals.
So one thing is there's a hell of a lot. Yeah. So there's an awful lot out there, and they're not actually used up, are they? So they're still there. So we can't keep this exponential growth in extraction is not possible in the long run. But it's not that we're then gonna, okay, the metals will run out, they're gonna fall off the cliff, so to speak, and we won't be able to survive. They're still all there. What about if you interpreted S as a stock of a pollution sink? That you change the direction of that R arrow, and it's actually pollution flows filling up a sink. And when the sink is full, we all die. Because then if you like, you sort of pass a tipping point. Might that make more sense? So what could we do for this picture? So this is totally leaving the question now, really. So where would this be coming from? There must be some other stock. So actually we could have ARR, but then we could say that P equals R. Because when you burn this stuff, you get this pollution out, and this line. So then, yeah, so that would be, and if we assume this is big enough to fill this, does that make any more sense? Like, let's take things one by one. What about the open access assumption? Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Like the open access to pollute? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that is turned into the open access to pollute, hasn't it? So we're assuming that the stock of this resource from which R is coming is very large, and that it's very cheap, this resource. So we can treat it as free, even if there are property rights over it, because it's so cheap. And then this open access to pollute is that if we think about climate conceivable scenario that there's a stock of that we're filling up this sort of non-renewable sink. Does that tally with the way the scientists talk about how we need to think about climate change?
Yeah, basically we're talking about a point where there's no return. It's not like we're gonna die immediately, but yeah.
There's a certain
So there's this, I mean, I would say yes and no, but it's certainly a much better fit than the old other model. This model now is saying much more about the real economy than the previous one. I think. So we talk about carbon budgets, don't we? What's a carbon budget? Does anyone know? So it's like in the Paris Agreement. It's like, okay, we want to stay below 2 degrees, say, or 1.5, if we're going to be very optimistic. And then they say, okay, that means that the total carbon emissions must be less than X. And that's the sort of budget. And of course, scientists don't agree about this, but you could say, well, let's say for total wipeout, we need to stay below. There might be some level, but okay, if we go beyond that, where it's all over. Probably, in my view, that's not really realistic. That we'd get totally wiped out with climate change. I just don't see that happening, however badly we screw up. But it's not inconceivable. And basically, so one of the things we're assuming here is that when the carbon dioxide is released, it's out there forever. It's like you've used up, in the old model, you've used up the stock, it's never coming back. Here it's like you've emitted the pollution, it's never going away. And that actually is a reasonable approximation for the carbon emissions. Like some of the carbon emissions get absorbed pretty quickly, but then there's, in the long run, ultimately, you build up the short run sinks and it just sticks there, basically. You've got this equilibrium with the ocean and so on, but the ocean stocks are equilibrated with the atmosphere, and then it's like, it's not going away. Okie doke. So, you could build a model that makes a bit more sense with polluting emissions instead. But then where's the big problem? So then you could say, okay, we're stuck. In that case, we're done for. At the moment, the way that picture looks. But we're not, are we? It's the same reason that Janina said a couple of minutes ago. If we think about, look at that picture and think about reality, what can we do?
Switch to another resource.
Right.
It doesn't
We
pollute.
don't need to use fossil fuels, right? We can use something else. And that's where the whole, the EKC kind of thing comes in. Okay, why do we use fossil? Because it's cheaper. What is the price of fossil over time, more or less? What happens to that?
Being constant.
Stay
Yeah.
more or less the same. Yeah. Typically, these resources, the prices just tend to stay the same because they vary in the short run, but in the long run, there's no cliff trend. What happens? Yeah. So we've got like solar, wind, fossil. Fossil is cheapest. But what happens to the valuation of the damages as we get richer? What happens to our valuation? The damages caused by a ton of carbon emissions. It goes up. So at some point, we switch. Right? So given that way of looking at it, the question is like, are we going to switch in time? Because we've got this sort of inexorable force pushing towards basically done everything in this question and then some, but let's just check. Okay, yeah. So actually, the simplest version in which AR is constant fits the data best, doesn't it? With exponential growth in resource use and constant price. Because the problem here is that the price is zero. In the data, the price is constant but not zero, the resource price. And R and Y track each other, and that's what we get out of this one, isn't it? Except that the price is zero instead. But it's kind of a spurious result, yeah. Maybe you don't know what spurious means. It doesn't really mean anything. It just happens to fit.
Right.
And therefore, it's not really telling us anything about the future. So the limits to growth people, they say, look, our model fits the data, our model predicts we're going to go over a cliff, therefore we're going to go over a cliff. That's bullshit. Okay. It's not enough just to fit some data. You choose some data and fit it with a model, and then show where the model's taking you. That's not enough. That's where we started the course, pretty much. I don't know if you remember. Okie doke. So I'm trying to, kind of wrap up the course in a way by doing this, looking at questions, but also trying to tie them into a bigger story. Time for a break, right?
Yeah.
15 minutes or what?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okie doke. The next one, but the math is trickier. But I'm not going to go through the math. So, yeah, just have a quick look at that while I run this off. Actually, yeah, how about trying to see if you can draw some kind of diagram with these elements. So it'll take 3 or 4 minutes for that, I guess.
It's confusing when running households and producing houses.
Aha, yeah, they're making houses, yeah.
You want a diagram, you said? On A?
It's really, we're not doing, I'm not to do the question really, but just to get a grip on what's going on.
Just that one?
Yeah. Or based on that structure. I'm going to hassle you because you've already got something.
I'm not sure how you do research into sex. Try to do a lot of psycho. I'm not
Yeah,
very
cool.
artistically talented.
No, it's the research house.
Cool, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the key, isn't it? You've got a key element.
University.
Right. So that 10 of them are off here, aren't they? And one's here. And that is 10 per period, whatever the period is. Yeah, okay, good. So that's fairly straightforward. The biggest problem is okay. So we've got this constant flow coming in, haven't we? This exogenous flow in of trees, which is just 10. And then we've got the workers trotting off, and 10 of them work in the factory. And one goes into the research sector. And that's pretty much it, and then they're making houses. And we've got this production function, which is with a low elasticity substitution. Okie doke. Let's write that down. Okay. So we know that we can do some math and we can work out something that we can call S if we want to, which is WLL over WRR, right? So what's that?
It's the factor shares.
Right, so this is what the firms here are spending hiring labor, and this is what they're spending buying the trees. So isn't it odd that the trees, you have to buy the trees, because they're just washing up on the beach? So how come I say that you have to buy them? How come I say that you have to buy them? The information there is in the question. The first 6 lines there. Yes. Good. Markets are perfect. So it's not a free-for-all, dash down to the beach and grab trees. It's like, so of course, it's not realistic to have perfect markets with only 11 people. But you can think of 11,000 people or whatever. We're told that they're perfect, so somehow. And you can imagine, okay, I've got property rights for all the trees that wash up on beach A are mine. All the trees on beach B, they're yours. All the trees on beach C, they belong to someone else, etc. And then they're traded, yeah? If you want to have a way of thinking about it, yeah. Okie doke. And given that epsilon is -1, what is going to happen, say, to, well, whatever, yeah. What's going to happen to S? If, imagine R goes up, okay? So more trees start washing up suddenly. What's going to happen to S, the way I've defined it, S here? Because we could have defined it the other way up here. the way I've defined it here, R goes up, what happens to S? It's like in the global economy, the flow of oil, the Saudis open the taps, the flow of oil increases, what happens to S if R is oil instead of trees?
It decreases.
I think you're thinking right, but you need to do a bit more than that. Because this is on the bottom line now. I don't know, maybe what I said was wrong. The share of oil is going to decrease.
Yeah.
But when this goes down, S actually goes up, yeah. Because I put oil on the bottom line here. So the way I've defined S, it goes up. The share of oil goes down. I think that's what you're thinking, which is correct. But actually S, the way it's defined, goes up, yeah. Okay. I just wanted to get that clear. So this is just straightforward, isn't it? We need to do first order conditions and stuff. It's just a math. And we can work out why. We know all these things. We can work out why really easily. And we can work out. Take from the first order conditions, we can work out WL and WR, and then we can get the shares. Okay. So we're going to spend more time on the later parts, okay? Maybe I'll just check what the answers are, so we can actually use them. Yeah, it's what I thought, so 9. So it turns out this is 9. So for every $9 that goes to labor, $1 goes to the tree sellers. Okay. And then this person in the research sector, what does she choose to research on, or what do they choose to research on? So we're assuming here that the researcher can divide their time between trying to raise AL and trying to raise AR. And if they spend all their time working on AL, then I think this is going to be 1, isn't it? Is that the way we've defined it? I think so. Yeah, ZL and ZR are the proportions of the year. So if the proportion is 1, 0, then AL is multiplied by 1.1, and AR just stays the same. If it's the other way around, 0, 1, then actually AR is multiplied by 1.9. So it seems to be easier somehow to raise tree productivity than it is to raise labor productivity. Relative investments are equal to the factor shares, to the relative factor shares. So how is this person going to allocate their time? Just think about that briefly. Okay. How is this person in the research sector going to allocate their time? Have you got it already?
I think so, but I'm not sure. I think so.
Have you got it?
Not necessarily.
But yeah.
Vera, what are the relative factor shares? That's this, yeah. So I just told you the answer there, but you worked it out in part A. So you're spending 9 times more on hiring labor than you are on buying trees. So then what are the relative investments in raising labor efficiency compared to raising tree efficiency? It's going to be 90% on labor and 10% on trees. And in the course, we kind of went through that, why that is. You can build a model to actually show that that is what will happen, given this kind of production function. But that's way too tricky to do in the exam. So we just say assume it. So ZL is going to be 0.9, isn't it? And ZR is going to be 0.1. So then what are the growth rates of AL and AR? What can we say about them in one single word?
Equal.
They're going to be equal, yeah? Do you see that, Vera? Yeah? Just checking that everyone's keeping up, kind of. And you've got that, Janina? Yeah. So, AL and AR both grew by the same factor. 1.09 is going to be, isn't it? 9%. So what is going to happen in the next period compared to the previous period? What will S be? What will happen to S? What will happen to Y? What will happen to WL? Oh, let's leave it there. It's super straightforward. Okay. So both of these went up by 9%. So what happens to the factor shares of the two inputs? Nothing's going to happen, right? Yeah. You're just going to trust your intuition here. It's super straightforward. But nothing's going to happen there. And what's going to happen to GDP? The input quantities stay the same, but the productivities went up by 9% of each.
They all go up for the same amount.
9%. Yeah. So super straightforward. Oh. Okay. So that's the baseline. Now imagine, so then we just got balanced growth here. So we got this fixed flow of trees, exponentially growing GDP. So it's like, if you imagine this is like wind and solar or something. If we have rising productivity, rising labor productivity, rising resource productivity, we can keep growing the value of what we're producing. This could be a metaphor for that. What if R actually went down over time? What difference would that make? So they're poor.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Well, since I'm not sure, but since they're poor substitutes, I think you should. It should increase the incentive to do some research on the resource.
Yeah, exactly. Because when R goes down, instead of 9 over 1, we might have 8 over 2.
Yeah.
Or if it goes down a lot, we might have 5 over 5. And then, if that's the case, then we'll have 0.5 and 0.5 Euler. So then AR is going to go up faster than AL, which will help to compensate. So there's this sort of inbuilt stabilization mechanism in the model. That if the resource starts getting scarce, we'll invest more in resource efficiency, which will alleviate the scarcity in the model. Okay, this is a model economy. And in theory, in the model, even if R approaches 0 over time in something like this, it's not going to be a problem, okay? Because there's no limit on the growth in AR. Of course, if it approaches too steeply, it could still be a problem. It depends. But it's not necessarily a problem anyway. Yeah. Okay. What's actually going on when AL and AR go up? Thinking about this. Let's have a look again at the first paragraph. It's actually also you need to look at A. So what's going on when AL goes up and what's going on when AR goes up? Give me some thoughts. So what kind of thing might lead to a boost in AL?
Developed a better technology than penance.
Right.
She's more efficient.
Such as
Sawmill.
a sawmill, yeah. And what kind of thing would make AR go up?
Being able to cut more planks from a tree. Also things like being more efficient with the resource.
Yeah,
Thinner plants maybe. Usually.
that would make sense, wouldn't it? I think you have to be careful with this. What do you guys think? Does that make sense? I
Yeah.
think it does.
Because I get a bit confused because it's R is always 10,
Yeah,
but it's how much you can do with 10 trees, right?
Yeah.
Increases.
so imagine you need 100 planks for a house. And then, if you can get 10 planks from a tree, but then if that changes and goes to 20, that's like R has gone up, hasn't it? But then, if that wasn't also going to raise AL, you would need to take twice as much time per tree, because you want to have the same time per plank, labour time 30, because that's AL, it's like labour time per plank. So that's the thing, some changes here are going to also affect AL. Like for instance, if you have a
a better design of house where you only need half the number of flags. Which is that going to affect? Is that going to affect AR or AL?
It's AL first, but well, what did you say? You have a new type of house.
That only need, it's just as good as the old ones, but you
Yeah.
only need half the number of flags.
I'd say it's an increase in AL.
Any other?
I was gonna say. I didn't hear what you said.
So you got a better design of house,
Mhm.
so you only need half the number of flags compared to the previous period. Is it AL that went up or AL? I'm kind of laughing because it's a bit of a trick question. You're half right. Both of you are half right. That's a big, a massive hit.
It's gonna be both.
They're both going to go up, right? It's the same number of trees, the same amount of work, you get double the amount of houses.
Mm.
So both AL and AR went up. Double. They both doubled. So it's a little bit tricky. But basically, AR going up is more planks per tree, more houses per tree. AL going up is more houses and more planks. Or yeah, ultimately more houses per working hour. And lots of things that you could imagine happening would raise both. But a sawmill typically, for instance, would only raise AL. Unless it also meant that you got thinner. But a sawmill might allow you to make thinner planks and use the trees more efficiently, and it would raise both. Okay. So why am I spending so much time on this? Because it's actually super important. Because the point is that typically rises in AL and AR are going to be closely tied together. Okay, I mean if you come up with like computers somehow on this island, that should help you raise both, shouldn't it? You should be able to find, with the help of your computers, you can like design better houses maybe, which would allow you to use your labor and your trees more efficiently. Etc. But in the model, these grow totally separately from one another. And we can like put all our efforts into growing this, and then nothing will happen with this, and vice versa. But in practice, it's like the rising tide which raises all the boats. These tend to grow together. And by shifting the research effort, we can change that slightly. You know, we can push one ahead compared to the other, but not to this extent where they just grow totally separately. So, if we're thinking about this model, so how do we deal with R going down in this model? We've already said it, but tell me again. We shift the researchers into working on resource efficiency. In the real economy, how do we deal with fossil fuels running out or the need to stop using them because we've added a pollution sector? One way is to increase the efficiency with which we use fossil fuels, isn't it? we try to make more efficient motors in our cars, for instance. But is that like, is this the key? So what else should we add to this? So this is like super limited, basically, how far we can get with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, then, no.
Partly because there's a bunch of other stuff we can do, and partly because this way of setting it up is overstating the possibility.
So we want to increase the efficiency in an alternative resource.
Right, so we can like
What do we want?
invent something else and use that instead. And yeah, we can just switch whatever, and then if we want to think about how we're using research effort, we could do the research there.
Mm.
So that's a massive one. Historically that's been the biggest one in terms of dealing with pollution. It's like, okay, we're just not going to use this technology anymore, we're going to use something else. There's another alternative, a totally different thing we can do in real economies. I think here the solarist mechanism.
Yeah, it's more the consumption side.
Yeah.
And we need something else than
So we
wooden
can have
houses.
sort of, this is supposed to be some office block. We can have labour going and working in offices and producing services, or whatever. We can buy goods that aren't so sort of heavy on energy. And historically we see these kind of switches going on, but what do we see historically here? It's kind of complicated actually, but what have we said in the course?
The alternative, we switch to more resource-intense goods.
Yeah. So it seems like we've switched to more and more resource-intensive goods over time. But at the same time, and I'm not sure if we ever really talked about this in the course, at the same time we do switch to services out of manufacture, which is a complicated story. It's basically to do with manufacturing productivity has gone up so fast that even though the quantity of goods out of here goes up super fast, faster than the quantity of services coming out of here. But the amount of labour is actually shifting from this one to this one, because productivity in this sector goes up so much faster than in this sector. And of course it's the quantity of goods that is then linked to the resource use. We didn't really cover that in the course, but the key thing from the course is what you said. I think it was Janina said anyway, that we'd shifted from the real bird's eye view. It's more like we shifted towards more resource and energy intensive goods over time. Oh, very good. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the third part here, where we said, discuss very briefly the interpretation, and we did that. But then, when we're talking about it in class, you often compare it to like the real world economy or whatever. Should we do that as well when we answer the questions, or like how it's not reasonable in our real world economy? Because it's, in the model it's like already given, right?
Right. Yeah, so I would say on this question, if you look at the question, part B here, because the B's disappeared, but part B is just really about the model, isn't it? So I don't think you need to bring in the real world there.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't do that. Yeah. So when you're doing the exam, try to answer the question rather than thinking about impressing the examiner, so to speak, with all the stuff that you know. That's a really, really bad strategy. To think I'm going to show off all this stuff that I know. Think I'm going to answer the question as well as I possibly can. If you write a bunch of stuff that isn't really relevant, it pisses me off because I have to read it. So in the worst case, it might cost you almost nothing. It's never going to benefit you, okay, writing stuff that is not relevant. And of course, if it's wrong, as well as being not relevant, then you're going to be losing money. So it's good to be thinking the way you're thinking, okay, should I bring this in or not? Just try to focus on answering the question. But of course, questions like part C, is super broad. Yeah. It's not like there's one right answer to that kind of question. And typically, like I think I said, I don't know if you were thinking about that in the email you wrote to me. It was like, okay, what do we really? Can you talk about what you need to get different marks?
Yeah.
Or what you need, because I think in the suggested answers, let's say this might not be enough for full marks, which is a kind of a what do you call it? I'm sort of covering my back, kind of.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, this is like half marks. It's like it might be 18 out of 20, or 19 out of 20. So it's not like, okay, you said these things and therefore you're guaranteed full marks. But it's still a very good answer. See what I said in the faucet for C here. Yeah. So this is basically what I said to you, but we went well beyond this in what I said to you, right? Because it's easier chatting away, you could cover different things. Much trickier to write it down. That's pretty much what we said. Or, what should we do next? Quick break, look at another question, something else.
Maybe a quick break.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could do a break.
5-10 minutes or something.
7 minutes?
Sure. To me.
Okie doke. Okay, so we're going to finish the exam. And again, I'm not going to go through the math. So this question, in a way, I don't know, it's super straightforward, really, but I don't know. I think there's answers to this kind of question haven't been that great. Have a quick look at that while I rub this stuff off.
maybe you can do a picture or a diagram based on that. You're just sitting back. Have you given up or have you finished?
I finished, but I guess I just did like how it goes off labors and
Okay,
then the
yeah,
labor
you're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's one thing you kind of missed out. The last bit before part A.
Before part A.
The last bit of the flow.
Mm-hmm. Ah, okay.
Yeah, you're also missing that.
But yeah, last one, so you have to use the final product. Oh,
Yeah, cool.
sorry.
So then what you can do, obviously, you could just have arrows here, which is what they have.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also just put a black box
Mhm.
here,
Yeah.
where these are sort of combined into a
I
final
haven't
product.
written down.
And one bit goes there. Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
That's right.
Okie doke. So what you can actually do here is sort of put a black box here. And then you have this, oops, and this, and this, and this, yeah. So this is Y, and then that's C, and this is X then. And this is R, and this is L. And there's going to be some relationship between X and R, isn't there? I'm told even what that is. In fact, it's 1 to 1, isn't it? So R equals X. R. And Y is C plus X, or C is Y minus X. That's called the resource constraint, typically in these macro models. This is effectively a macroeconomic model, yeah? Which is tracking everything in the economy. And this is the resource constraint. Like we're making this stuff, and what could it be used for? Okie doke. If we put all this into a black box, what would the equation for y be? If we put all of this into a black box. Think about that. It's not going to be that. Yeah? Right. So what do we see we've got this black box, we're in some physics lab, and we test lots of different combinations of L and R, and then see how much comes out, and then plot graphs, and we could do God knows what are we going to find. We're going to find this, aren't we? What should I have here? Is it 1 minus alpha?
Alpha.
Alpha. Yeah. So what's this production function? It's a Cobb-Douglas, isn't it? So what are the factor shares? They're fixed, aren't they? Alpha for labor and 1 minus alpha for the resource. If we raise AR, if we put researchers onto raising resource efficiency, is that going to help reduce R?
Thinking.
You gave me Alexander gave me a shake.
Yeah.
Anyone want to nod or? Was that a shake from VR? So we can take these out, can't we? And we can write AR to the 1 minus alpha, AL to the alpha, times L to the alpha, R to the 1 minus alpha. And then imagine raising this. It's just raising productivity in the economy, isn't it? It's not going to help reduce R. It depends kind of what's exogenous and what's endogenous, but I think the way we set this up, you'll end up with using more R, because you'll sort of suck more of this in. In a bigger economy with bigger productivity, you're going to end up sucking in more resources. So if we want to get resource use down for some reason, it's not going to help to try and boost the resource productivity. What might help instead? Taxing the resources. And of course, if the real problem is that it's emissions here that are the problem, we could tax emissions here. Would make more sense, but maybe it's tricky to tax emissions, so we just tax the resource. It's like with petrol in cars, we don't actually tax the emissions from the petrol, we just tax the petrol, don't we? But we know that when you burn the petrol. Okay, so if you can just see that, then you basically pretty much home on this question, because then you can, when you do the math, for the math here, you're supposed to go inside the black box and work out stuff. But then you should get, your answer should be consistent with this, right? And my idea is, if you've done this course and got this overall, if you've got a grip of what's going on, you should be able to see that straight away, kind of. You should draw a picture like this and straight away be able to say, well, look, this is just like a Cobb-Douglas inside a black box, which we're then opening up. Okay, and this could explain why, because this is kind of what we see in the long run data, isn't it? Because with the Cobb-Douglas, it's consistent with this long run data here. And this is one way of explaining it, that actually it's not about firms substituting between inputs, the high substitutability here. It's actually about consumers substituting between products.
But there's a problem if we're trying to understand energy intensity. And that is that even the really energy intense products like flight, passenger air transport, they're only about 20% energy. So if we take the black box away, what should we draw instead to match the real economy better? So let's make this one an office block. And let's say, for simplicity, let's say that the office block actually doesn't use any energy. Or it's so low compared to labour that we ignore it. But then I've said, yeah, we need to change some things here. What do we need to change then? Based on what it says there for part B.
Do you want like different or like more products coming from the factory that extracts resources with different levels of energy intensity?
No, not really. No, that's not what I'm after. But Janina's looking very relaxed. Is it because
What?
you've decided your answer, or because you?
It's because I'm
Give
not
up.
sure what you're after.
Yeah,
So
I kind of suspected that. So to make that diagram as drawn now, so that's for the original model, isn't it? I took the black box away. That matches the original model. But then in part B, it says, well, look, is this really relevant? Because in real economies, the most energy intensive products don't use pure energy. They only use about 20% energy by factor share. So what's the other 80%? Labour capital. Typically, we're constantly ignoring capital. If we're talking about a real economy, it's a combination of labour and capital. But if you want to say labour, that's fine. We've so much ignored capital in the course that it's totally understandable if you forget it when we're talking about real economies. But ideally, labour and capital. So there's 20% of the factory's costs in the energy intensive factories are going to energy and 80% to labour or labour capital. So how do we need to change the picture?
we need to draw labor arrow.
Right, yeah.
Factory.
So we need to divide the labour like this, don't we? And this is actually like, by value, 80%, 20%. So then, if we raise AR by 10%, say, okay. Is this sector 1 or sector 2? It's sector 2, isn't it? Y2, Y1. How much is P1 going to go down by? No, P2. If you can work it out exactly, that's great. If you just give me a rough answer, that's fine. Do you understand the question?
Do you mean like what's happened in the real world, or?
No, in the model now.
Yeah, okay.
So in the original model, if you raised AR by 10%, you would reduce the price of Y2 by 10%. Because you could make the same amount, or for the same inputs, you get 10% more product. But is that still the case now? So actually, let's say that in the old model, if you raised AR by 10%, you could make the same amount of product with 10% less input. Okay. Therefore, it's 10% cheaper, 10% drop in price. Perfect markets everywhere. So that's why you can draw these conclusions in that way. When there's market power, it's always trickier. You can't just say cost and price are the same. Or if there's scarcity, you can't say that. But here, we don't have either of those. Okay. Now we've said, in this model, we said AR goes up by 10%. Imagine you're trying to produce the same quantity of Y2. You're going to need 10% less R, aren't you? At least if it's Leontief. We haven't given you a production function. Let's assume it's Leontief. And if AR goes up by 10%, you're going to need 10% less R. So the costs for your R, they're going to go down from like 20 to what? See the 20 there? 20%. Think of that as $20. What's 10% of 20? It's 2, right? So your energy costs are going to go down from 20 to 18.
Yeah.
This is all very hand-wavy in a way, but
Mhm.
but your total costs are going to go down from 100 to 98.
93%.
Right. So this is why if with this economy, you shouldn't get this 100% rebound here. Because raising energy efficiency by 10% will only reduce the price of the energy-intensive goods by 2%. So therefore, you shouldn't expect a very big increase in the consumer demand for the energy-intensive goods. So therefore, you should actually get energy savings. Which means that the model is no longer fitting the long-run data. Because the long-run data sort of says that, look, the energy share is constant. So this is a kind of a dilemma for the model. So I've sort of said, look, we've got these shifts in consumption patterns, which seem to be important, but it doesn't seem like they could be a whole story. And maybe it's a combination of different factors. We haven't really talked about this in the course. But maybe it's both shifting consumption patterns and, like I said, oh, well, look, let's assume this is Leontief. But it's not going to be Leontief, is it? There's going to be some possibility for the firms to substitute here. So imagine this is passenger aircraft. And imagine the motors on the airplanes get 10% more efficient. So one thing that happens is that the plane tickets get slightly cheaper and consumers choose to fly a bit more compared to this other stuff. But another thing that happens is that at the firm level, why might the motors get 10% more efficient,
why might the fuel saving per passenger be less than 10%? Why might it only be 5%? What sort of things might the firms do when fuel efficiency of the planes increases? Kind of tricky question. I don't know. Did you get the question?
Yeah.
Can you come up with some ideas? What kind of things might SAS do if they're suddenly supplied with much more efficient engines for their planes?
Like offer, that's wrong.
Yeah. So
No, but I always think maybe they offer longer flights, but that's maybe more demand question.
Yeah, so that's, 'cause
Yeah.
this is like per passenger kilometer.
Mm-hmm.
Why might they choose to fly less efficiently, if you like? Or what,
They
in
might
what ways?
increase the number of flights.
Yeah, but that's, because if it meant that one thing they might do is not work quite as hard to fill the planes. They might change their pricing strategy. If the fixed cost, if the relationship between the variable cost of the fuel and the fixed cost of having the planes and so on changed, they might choose to like fly the planes more, even though they're not filling them up as much. That could be one possible thing. Another thing they might do, if you think about driving your car, I don't know how much you think about this kind of thing, or maybe you won't, probably don't have cars, I don't know. So you want to get from A to B, and you're thinking, oh, fuel's costly, but I kind of like to get there. There's a trade-off between speed and fuel use in that. So if you suddenly get more efficient engines, maybe they choose to fly a bit faster, which is going to use more fuel, but will lead to happier customers. There's a bunch of stuff they can do, which if they get intrinsically more efficient technology, they might end up not with the full benefit in terms of reduced fuel use, because they compensate in other ways. That's going beyond anything we talked about in the course. Okay, so what extent is the model relevant for real economies? It's problematic because it's dividing these goods up between like pure energy and pure labor. Sorry, pure energy and pure labor, but actually the more energy intensive goods are only like 20% energy, 80% labor. And then if we just do that and leave the rest of the model the same, we don't end up with this aggregate. If we then put a black box around this and start testing different quantities of labor and resource, you're not going to get this. And that's really as far as you're expected to go according to the question. Yeah, okay. So one thing I should have mentioned there is that, which we have talked about a lot in the course, is another reason, a more likely reason why. Yeah, I really should have mentioned that. Why do consumers shift from from Y1 to Y2, or into more energy intensive products? One important reason could be income effects as well. That's what we have talked about in the course, so I really should have talked about that. We got richer, and then we choose stuff like flying around when we get richer. Okay, are you up for the last question?
Yes.
Yeah.
clean up the board. Or think about part A. Not consistent with historical data. So what does the historical data show?
Flat.
Flat prices. What more does it show?
Shows that GDP or growth and resource use is tracking each other.
Yeah. Very broad brush, of course, and it's going to vary. It's not like a perfect fit by any means, but if you want to summarize things super simple, in a very simple way, that's how you do it. So, how can we explain this? And with a focus on this, yeah. So the key, you have the key thing, the flatness, but I just wanted to throw that in as well. But in question, the focus is very much here, isn't it?
Right.
So if we're drawing our picture, where's the focus? So this is totaling, isn't it? There's no inputs here because it's free to extract, but unlike in the first question, there are property rights here. So it's not just a free for all. So how do we need to change this to get constant prices? Let's have a think about it. How do we need to change the model? So this is the diagram to show the totaling model, isn't it? You could even, draw me a diagram.
I
Diagram.
think I can answer it, but what did you answer? Sorry, what question did you answer?
Yeah,
now?
so draw me a diagram which is kind of like that one, but slightly different to explain constant resource prices.
Mhm.
Always looking at yours, Janina, because you're usually quickest.
I'm not sure what you asked for right now. And then like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to adapt this to explain, so we say, just straight away from this, we say, oh look, resource price is going to track the interest rate, or they're going to grow at the interest rate. So what arrows or whatever do we need to add, plus maybe a few words of explanation to make them constant? Have you got something or not?
no,
Sorry?
not process and digging. Is that it?
Say again?
Like how efficiently we're able to dig, or like how cost we can.
Could be, yeah, but I mean, give us some, where are the arrows going to go for a start?
Hours.
Arrows. Pilarna. Do you have one? No?
Well, I got confused with this because, I mean, you want us to write this diagram, or what we call it, to
Yeah.
match the historical data.
Right.
Okay. But so, according to the historical data, wouldn't like the resources, because hoteling would say, we would scarcity rent.
Yeah.
But in reality, we haven't because we have so much resources, right?
Right.
So then you would say that resources were like fixed or land or no?
So it's tricky to draw the infinite resources,
Yeah.
but that's, yeah. So you might need to explain that.
Yeah.
But you can still draw an arrow or two. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, no. You see, if we just made this, if we just did this,
Yeah.
so that would not do the job.
Oh.
No.
Okay. Why not?
Because we don't have infinite resources.
No, but even if this was the model, so we have a model and there are infinite resources in our model. Because this is the job now. We're supposed to come up with, okay, we're supposed to explain the data. Okay, but for now, let's just say we've just come up with a model. And in the model we say these are infinite. But if we do the math on this model, it won't fit the data. Why not? What's the resource price going to be in this model?
0.
Yes! Good, well done.
But do you want an arrow from the households to the resource or the extraction?
So you have to have some cost for extracting the resource, right? Otherwise, in this case, the price is just 0. Yeah. Because there's no scarcity and no cost for extracting it. It's just totally free. Doesn't matter, even if there's property rights, it's worthless because there's infinite amount of it. So we can either say, look, we have to send some labor as well as sending labor here, we have to send some labor here. Or, what else could we do?
Do it from the first.
We can send some of the final product as an intermediate good to use in extraction. And it turns out that both will give us the same result. So if it's an intermediate product, we'll assume that its productivity stays the same. So R is like phi times X or something. If it's labor, we would assume that the flow of extraction was like phi, was sort of AL, LX, and AL will go up, but because WL also goes up, you still get the constant price. So that's the one case. R is AL, LX. AL goes up, but WL also goes up. So extraction per person goes up, but extraction costs per unit stay the same, or we can just say we use the final good, some of it for consumption, some of it as an input, and we have this production function. Yeah? Okay, so this model would explain the historical data. But if we want to predict future prices, so actually let's go with this one, because this is nicer for predicting the future. Actually, it doesn't really make any difference, but whatever. So if we want to predict future prices, what do we need to do? We need to get rid of this infinite assumption, don't we? What can we do instead? What picture can we draw here?
Like how long, is it still abundant or is it like, is it scarce?
isn't it? At some point in the future, presumably, it's going to get scarce.
Yeah. 'Cause you were making the case that it's like if we were to extract like all the material in the world, it would take like 700 years or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So I would say it's pretty abundant, right?
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
But if we want to be able to predict a long time into the future, then at some point we know that.
Can you the barrel? When there's the digging person.
The
standing-
digging thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is supposed to be like the ground, yeah. And at the moment we're scratching the surface, so the depth isn't increasing, or not very much. So that's hardly putting any pressure on the price. Which would, but if we start significantly getting deeper, that will put upward pressure on the price and slow down the rate of extraction. And if we ever get towards the bottom, what kicks in then?
Scarcity rent.
Overlaying and scarcity rent, yes, good. Okay, so that's part A, basically, to explain this model. Energy, land, iron, copper, rare earth. What trends do we expect to see in their prices in the long run? What do you reckon? Quite a demanding question. I can't remember how much we ever talked about this in the course.
I think we expect land prices to increase quite a lot as the population is going to increase, and we're also expecting the agriculture and like rising water is going to take some of the land space.
So we start super simple and hold the land area constant and assume there's no sort of land degradation and stuff, which is going to make things messy. What would the long run data suggest we should expect to see? So we've got L is constant. If we assume that the global economy is still growing, and that's including both productivity growth and population growth, then what should WL be doing?
Tracking GDP.
Right. And we're seeing this already. I didn't find any very good data for that. I actually found some data a month or so ago, some better data that I could add into the course. But Canadian, what's it called, the sort of Great Prairie, sort of wheat belt, Canadian land prices going back to 1900. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of more or less did this. It actually was more flat and then going up. Because of course, if you go back far enough and you're in a kind of frontier sort of situation, then it's like, oh, we need some more land, we'll just go and take some kind of, we'll take that wild land and just start using that for agriculture. But then, so then L can actually grow on the land area. Yeah, L, whatever. Okay. What about energy? So how are we going to get, so this is, if you think of like electricity, so how are we going to make electricity in the future? Very likely. Say again?
Renewable.
Right. And what do we need to make renewable, to make electricity from renewable sources? If we get super good at building windmills and making solar PV films and so on,
super efficient with with renewables, it shouldn't increase the costs, right?
There's still one input that we're going to need. Another input. Apart from the...
Research.
Nah. So we've got super good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We've got these amazingly cheap PV films that we can make really, really cheaply.
What's the land rating?
We're going to need land, aren't we?
Mm.
And what have we said about the price of land?
Increasing.
So what's the price of electricity going to be?
Increase.
In the long run, potentially, it could be dominated by the cost of land. That could be the biggest cost of making renewable energy. We already see it, like in Germany, for wind power, right? It's a big issue. Like, we don't want these things near our homes. If I understand from reading, I don't read the German press, but I read the Guardian. It seems to be becoming a big issue. So that's about the value of land, isn't it? It's like, because they're making a noise, which is reducing the immunity value of land. And if you're rich enough on other things, you start to really care about this sort of rumbling noise in the background. It's already happening. And of course, yeah, in terms of solar PV up here in the northern Europe, it's like, get it. If you want to generate enough solar PV to run the economy on by putting out solar collectors here in Sweden, for Sweden, it's like, it's not going to happen. You need to generate, in the desert somewhere or whatever, and ship the electricity on high voltage cables. If you want a solar dominated economy in something like Sweden. What about these things?
What did that depend? Yeah. Well, in the very long run, they should increase, right? Unless we find substitutes for them.
Right. So somehow, like, we can't keep this exponential growth in the rate of use, can we? Because we've shown, like, in 700 years, blah, blah, blah. And of course, in reality, much sooner than that, it's going to be crazy. The 700-year thing was we're digging up the entire Earth's crust every year, which is obviously way beyond anything that is remotely possible or desirable. So what's going to make the prices flatten or even go up? Sorry, yeah, what's going to make the prices go up? And what would?
The scarcity.
Could be the scarcity, yeah.
Or just like the digging cost.
No, probably not the digging cost. I mean, it could be, yeah, that we have to dig deeper. One way or another, the prices are going to have to go up, aren't they? And if the prices start going up, and like in the long run, oh, we're out of time. Okay, in the very long run, we've got a fixed area of the surface area of the Earth, right? And it's like, okay, we want area to live in, we want area for recreation, we want area for nature, we want area to grow food, we want area where we're digging up minerals. This is going to, the sort of fixed surface area of the Earth is going to become more and more like redland, so to speak. And of course, for minerals in the very long run, it's like, well, we don't want to be digging up this stuff anymore. It's going to become more and more about recycling. That it's going to be, okay, we want some new metal thing, let's take down one of the old metal things. But either way, I would say that very likely, I mean, it's more complicated, trickier to argue, but I would argue that the price of metal ores and so on would also be constant. I'm sorry, would also track the growth rate
sort of Herman Daly kind of thing. I don't know if you've read any of the Herman Daly things, but this sort of steady state economy. So Herman Daly says we can't have growth. Where I would say there's no reason why we can't have growth in the value of what we produce and consume, but we can't have growth in physical quantities of materials and so on in the long run. And if that growth in the physical quantities is going to stop, then that is going to, that's going to mean that the prices must be going up. Like run something like tracking the growth rate of the value of what we're producing. Oh, so that was quite a tricky question, I guess. Like the first part was a bit of a gift, I would say. Second part, trickier. Yeah, but some kind of reasoning along those lines is what I was after. Okay, we're over time. Oh, we're quite well over time, sorry. Yeah, you've got an exam tomorrow. Good luck for that. Let me know if you've got questions and so on. I've marked your papers, they're all fine. There's the odd bonus point here and there. I didn't have my notes from the presentations with me, so I couldn't put it all together and put the stuff out. I just got to do that. And I can't remember, is the Gobbit deadline is for Friday, isn't it?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
review.
Yeah. So I haven't marked them myself yet. I'm sure they're all brilliant. Okay. So as usual, just please, don't hesitate to get in touch if you have questions or whatever.
I'm gonna
See you
be,
on Friday.
yes, sir, I'm gonna be late on Friday because we have presentations in health course.